Davao model na binanggit ni Colonel Garma.
Karma, exactly. So here you see a perfect corroboration, triangulation of what Garma, a complete insider, some would say former lover of Superman. Napaka maayos ng itsura ni Superman ganun. Tapos ito yung anyway, I don't want to be judgy, but uh yeah, guys. I mean, this is how bad things were back in the day. This is how scary things were. This were how bad things were. We have had nothing like this. Even at the height of dictatorship ni Marcos Sr., hindi ganun yung usapan. There was some sort of logic, some sort of discipline, some sort of at least pretension to constitutionality, etc. Ito talagang mayor gangster eh. Talagang mayor gangster. Mayor gangster talaga. Tapos Superman pa. Dapat Superman ang palita ko. Ano rin ha. Wag na. Wag na. Tanayin na lang kay Ronald Llamas. Maraming mga Superman. Maraming mga Superman dyan. Now, in that context, dahil may mga umepal na nagmamaganda na, "Hoy, si Richard ngayon lang maingay sa mga Duterte." And like, it takes to be, either you're such a hater or complete idiot or complete illiterate person to ignore the thousands of articles and interventions of made throughout the Duterte years, questioning not only his China policies, drug war, everything, etc. But anyway, so there was this cloud chaser boomer who was trying to twist. Obviously, sinungaling tong tao to kasi hindi niya binasa yung book. And even if binasa niya, which I doubt, nag-nitpick siya and all of that. I think binasa lang niya yung preview lang ng free on Amazon. Alam ko yung mga ganyan style kasi Ilocano ko. Kung ayoko bilhin, kukunin lang yan. But anyways, sabi ko, alam mo ba, actually, balikan ko yung libro na sinulat natin from 2016 to 2017. Obviously, for anyone who knows about publication, when you publish art journal articles or academic work, it takes 1 year for them to come out. So 2016-17 pa lang, I was writing about this and just as these horrible things were happening. And interestingly, page 2 pa lang, so if you read the book, page 2 pa lang, you will see dito sa yellow, page 1 and 2 pa lang, I was already mentioning the parallels with fascism in Italy almost 100 years earlier. Let me read from that so that people get some idea. And remember, I'm writing this in 2016 and 17 when these things are happening right and left, even to the most powerful people. So just think of the level of risk there was in this. Now, of course, it's an academic work. Who cares about it? But last time I checked, this has a triple digit, 150 Google Scholar citation, which last time I checked is more citation for that work alone than, entire body of work of a lot of pseudo academics or whatever mediocre academics out there. Now, this is page 1 pa lang. Reflecting, so this is, I'm referring to an Italian thinker who was, of course, Italianos, my favorite people. No, Italian thinker who was imprisoned during Mussolini's time, and he had horrible time there. And while he was in prison, sinulat niya yung prison notebooks, which until now serves as one of the most useful and poignant and illuminating materials on how democracies collapse and democracies bring fascism on the back of demagoguery. Reflecting on his country's transmogrification in the opening decades of the 20th century, the Italian Marxist thinker Antonio Gramsci lamented how the old order is dying and the new cannot be born, warning how in this interregnum a great variety of morbid symptoms begin to appear. So in short, the old order in Italy, whereby politics was swinging between center right and center left, was completely disintegrating. And something new and something scary was coming about. And guess what? That's exactly how I felt about what was happening in the Philippines from 2016 to 2017. Like, what on earth is happening in the Philippines? People are cheering on mass murder. People are cheering on things, character assassination of Leila de Lima. People are okay with this. People are happy with this. So the shock that Antonio Gramsci was feeling about the disintegration of the last vestiges of democracy or sanity in Italy, I was also feeling it. Kaya ang page 1 and 2 pa lang yan. With the liberal bourgeoisie discredited, socialists and fascists fought for the soul of the Iberian nation throughout the first half of the century. As Gramsci observed in his home country of Italy, incurable structural contradictions have revealed themselves, and that despite this, the political forces which are struggling to conserve and defend the existing structure as the establishment elite hopelessly makes every effort to cure them. In short, he was talking about their own version of, sorry for saying it, Dilawan, how the old liberal elite in Italy was trying so hard to regain the confidence of people, to say, hey, let's do this democracy. Hey, I know it's imperfect, but believe in us. They just lost their grip on popular imagination, and the people at this point in time were to be were essentially led to believe that they needed radical change, tunay na pagbabago, change is coming kind of situation. Again, you can see a lot of parallels still. I mean, it takes a lot of essentially idiocy not to see why would I start the first second pages of my book by talking about the emergence of fascism in Italy. The upshot was a political deadlock which paved the way for the rise of the most pernicious perversion of populism. So this is where I talked about the overlap between populism and fascism, that the worst form of populism, when you push it all the way to the right, it ends up and culminates in fascism. It was not until the end of World War II, which led to the decisive defeat of fascism and morbid demise of its leadership, Benito Mussolini and Doña Rachelle, that Italy began to reconstitute its foundation and embark on a new phase of economic expansion and democratization. Almost exactly a century henceforth, Gramsci's portrayal of his home country eerily resembles the zeitgeist among many troubled emerging as well as mature democracies in the opening decades of the 20th century, 21st century. All right, ulitin ko yan, ha? You must be quiet, to not get what I'm getting at here. All right. Almost exactly a century later, Gramsci's portrayal of his home country of Italy eerily resembles the zeitgeist among many troubled emerging as well as mature democracies in the opening decades of the 21st century. Throughout the world, recent years have seen the liberal elite suffering one electoral setback after the other, as demagogues and strongmen populists dislodge the establishment in favor of a new brand of politics which seems both familiar and new. New because, as I argued, there are also elements to right wing populist leaders in the 21st century, which of course has no precedence in history. Kasama po dyan is yung networks of disinformation, postmodern way of doing things, no attention whatsoever to structures of constitutional order, not even a pretension to what the Mussolinis of this world were trying to put out. I mean, like talagang bara-bara style, right? Again, this was done in a climate of hyper disinformation enabled by your not only architects of disinformation, but also by your algorithm driven and bot manipulated social media platforms. So again, this is just page 1 and 2, and absolutely clear what I was getting at. In fact, later on I'll talk about Hannah Arendt. Later on I'll talk about Karl Polanyi, a lot of people who were reflecting on the horrific disintegration of European and mature democracies into a state of fascism and barbarism almost exactly 100 years ago. But one thing is important here. So, people like Dr. Walden Bello openly said that Duterte is a fascist original. Randy David came a little bit more indirectly, used the term Dutertismo, which kind of sounds like generalismo. And generalismo, from Chiang Kai-shek to Mussolini, has essentially intonations of fascismo. My take on this was slightly different. Um, my take on this drew on this fantastic work by the great Italian. Again, Italians are my friend. I mean, I'll tell you what. One of the persons that convinced me Trump will win in 2016 was my Italian friend, si Giacomo. So back in 2015, I was at the European Parliament, and we were discussing prospects for bilateral relations. Sorry, 2016, before elections, like 3-4 months before. And I was in the European Parliament. I met my friend. We went to there's a square outside the European Parliament. Umupo kami, beautiful day, beautiful. And then I and Giacomo were talking about, and he really convinced me Trump is gonna win next. Tinanong ko siya again this time. He's 50-50, and I'm also 50-50. I think there's a good chance that Trump can win again, but I don't want to get into that kasi marami nang galit sa akin ng mga Democrat friends and all of that. Okay. All right, chill, chill, chill. Although I shared already the the prediction model by the economists, which was developed by this very young gentleman. I think he's just barely 30, who was able to from Texas A&M, who was able to predict almost perfectly the Democrats' success in 2020 and 2022 midterm elections. But anyway, um, so based on that, Kamala will win popular vote, although by a narrower margin than I think both Hillary and even Biden. But the electoral college is going to be 260 plus versus 270 plus. Very close, but Trump could still pull it off. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that. We'll have a different discussion on that. But I want to get back to this issue of fascism. My framework was Umberto Eco. So I think some of you may be familiar with Umberto Eco because he's this brilliant guy who was in literature, postmodern studies, but he also was, in his younger years, in the youth fascist movement of Mussolini. I mean, this was a time when no one had a choice, but you had to, I mean, fascism already took over the country. And he talks about his own personal experience of joining the fascist youth. No, and then from there he goes on and says, fascism comes in many forms, including in quote unquote lighter proto or UR fascism form. In fact, the title of the brilliant article by Umberto Eco at the New York Review of Books is Ur-Fascism. And here he talks about essentially, I don't want to use the word baby fascism or less, let's just call them less notorious forms of fascism, including in General Franco in España and all sorts of different caudillos all around Latin America and beyond. And essentially in this article by Umberto Eco, he looks at a dozen criteria. So meron siyang criteria ng paano mo masabi kung isang leader ay fascist or hindi, or at least fascist light. I mean, fascist light sounds paradoxical. I mean, it sounds, it's obviously, not only paradoxically oxymoronic, but nevertheless, it's like there are like levels to fascism. There's like this scary level, you go Mussolini Second World War level, and then there's like lighter versions, if you can put it that way. So this is his framework, and he will say you can say a leader is fascist if, among other things, so nagbigay siya ng criteria, ito yung isang tao na ayaw sa democratic discourse. Ito yung tao na ayaw niya sa evidence-based political discussion. Ayaw na ng facts. Ayaw niya ng siyensya. Ayaw niya ng enlightenment values of pluralistic democratic reason debate. If anything, galit siya doon. Sa tingin niya, waste of time ang discussion. Ayun yung salita. Waste of time ang democratic discussions. Waste of time yung hearings sa Senate. Waste of time na titignan mo yung datos kung totoo or hindi. More importantly, one of the criteria that I saw there was, I think this is how I put it, but I'm not sure if Umberto Eco also said it the same way, the cult of action. So mga fascist, or Ur-Fascist rather, the proto-fascist, they celebrate action over thinking. They celebrate action over analysis. Sila yung analysis paralysis on steroids. The worst form of the analysis paralysis mindset. The idea is, wag mo nang sayangin yung oras mo, bara-bara, go and do things. And in a way, it's a cult. Because tuwan-tuwa yung mga followers nila dun sa leader nila because he's at least doing something. And guess what? I noticed when I talk to a lot of marami akong kinausap ng ating mga kababayan back in the day. Sabi ko, hindi ba obvious na yung mga big time talaga, na super big time, si Peter, hindi naman nahuhuli. Tapos marami naman na namamatay, hindi naman sigurado na talaga drug dealer ka na. Tapos small time pa naman yung iba. And by the way, extrajudicial killing is still wrong, regardless. Sabi ng iba, at least yung mama, hindi naman perfect. At least may ginagawa. So that's a your fascist mindset. This idea, just do something about it and that's good enough. Now, obviously you can see the implications of this article because there is another fantastic piece on New York Times that came out in 2017 that said Donald Trump may not be a fascist, may not even be a Ur-Fascist, but he's more like Berlusconi, Silvio Berlusconi, right? This kind of a comical, semi-authoritarian, kind of leader who nevertheless corrupts the systems and brings it down. But there's still people who say that that's version 1 of Trump. If Trump comes back, you're going to see at the very least this Ur-Fascism version, right? Because again, go and read that book, on New York Review of Books. It's arguably the best one I've seen, because I've seen a lot of works on fascism by different scholars saying, fascism, part of that is about imperial expansionism, ganun. Pero sabi ko, paano kung yung ganitong leader ay lumabas sa isang bansa na katulad ng Pilipinas, na sabihin natin hindi naman expansionary, wala naman tayong military na suguri na bang bansa. But if you look at Michael Mann, among other things, one element of fascism is also having militias, reliance on parastatal forces. And that's where the importance of the Davao Death Squad and all comes in, right? That's the leash they have on public. That's how they scare you. On surface, the institutions are still intact. There's still a Congress running. There's still military. But they turn police or parts of the police, or they bring in their own militia forces that act essentially as brown shirts, as we saw in the case of Mussolini's Italy. So, bakit ko sinasabi yan? Bakit ko sinasabi yan? Aside from the fact that it just proves na complete idiot yung ibang tao are saying na, we were playing safe and whatever. It's like, can you imagine comparing the Philippines to, or invoking fascist Italy 100 years ago in an opening book about Duterte? Now, you tell me in what cloud chaser boomer world, that's not the point. My point is malaking implication ito sa atin. Because parati ko naririnig dun sa ating mga kababayan, especially mga kaibigan natin na kakamping, kaibigan natin sa opposition, na parehas lang si BBM at saka mga Dutertes. I beg to disagree. Because, and I think good friends, legit historian friends, my UC Berkeley professor friends, Lele Cloud, among others, would say, for everything you can say against BBM, laking scandal sa Maharlika Fund, laking scandal sa PhilHealth Fund, ang daming mga kababalakan ng kapalpakan, no? Ang daming mga issues about revisionism, historical distortionism, attempts to retrieve yung mga ill-gotten wealth. Yes, yung paway, we can talk about that. No problem. But at the end of the day, BBM, so far, because things could change again, kaya sabi ko kailangan opposition, kaya nga sabi ko dun sa iba huwag kayong maghanash kung di nyo naintindihan yung sinasabi namin. At huwag kayong maghanash kung wala kayong big picture analysis. Because people like me, it's our job to look at all the moving parts. Kung ito lang nakikita mo, tas may nasabi ako na hindi tugma dun sa puso mo, tas atakin mo ako, you're never gonna improve. You're never gonna see the big picture. Because there are all of these moving parts. It's a Rubik's Cube. There are all of these moving parts. So kaya nga malakas dapat ng opposition, blah, 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 kasi next year, you don't know. But so far, BBM is operating within the framework of our, yes, very problematic and frail, but nevertheless a constitutional democracy. Kasi trapoismo, pero sa loob pa rin ng itong coordinates. Duterte is totally outside. Totally outside. And my contention is, if not for the Philippine military, tapos ng usapan 2017 pa lang. I'll tell you what, if Secretary Lorenzana and General Ani back then, who later on became the ALG Secretary and now who is the National Security Advisor, if pumayag sila nung 2017 dun sa proposal ni Digong na magkaroon ng nationwide martial law, tapos ng usapan, guys. Si Sara na ang reyna natin ngayon. Yeah. Si Sara ng reyna natin ngayon. Yeah. Those eyes, Chico. They don't lie. So, ang laki ng utang. Again, sorry again, I'm here. I know may mga kaibigan tayo na sasabihin nila, sabi niya, military, napakasama, ganyan. Tapos ito pa yung mga enablers ni Duterte. But whatever. But I'm telling you, my friends, for everything we did in media, civil society, if not for the Armed Forces of the Philippines holding the line, tapos ng usapan 2017 pa lang. Ubus na. Walang kwenta yung mga legislators, they were not doing their jobs. The Supreme Court was completely besieged and all of that. I mean, no offense. Wala talaga. Kayang-kaya nila durugin yung lahat. So the military was the last one that held the line. They really held the line. They were the last one. I'll tell you what. That's an important piece of information that it doesn't come up in this usual dilawan discourse conversation, whatever, which is unfortunately a very low level of political analysis. It's more about emotion. Again, I have to tell this because napapansin ko hanggang ngayon, stuck in echo chambers pa rin ibang tao. Hindi sila nag-iisip ng big picture. And then when people like me come out and talk and say something really actually of value, ganun, atakin pa kami. Diba? I remember yung mga sinabi ko na naman kay Sara, ganyan. Tignan mo yung nangyari kay Marcoleta. And again, isipin nyo, ang market ay hindi kakamping. Obviously, never makakamping, I believe kay ang market dito is the median voter outside there. Again, you wouldn't understand it if you're not listening to proper political analysis. But anyway, um, what was I about to say? Saan ba tayo? Tuloy, wala yung train of thought natin. No. So, what I'm saying is a complete different kind of threat ang mga Dutertes. So, you have to distinguish that. So, yes, it's neither nor, but may malaking diferensya nung Team Kadiliman versus Team K1 versus K2. They're not necessarily at the same level. So, it's in this context, guys, na sinasabi ko talaga na sobrang mahalaga na magkaroon tayo ng pag-uusap na hindi base sa emotions and fanaticism and all of that. Pag-uusap na based on hard facts and hard choices and big picture analysis. And I've promised you guys this. I've been doing this since day one. I've been doing this in my books, in my journal articles, in my works. Few people in this country read me, but at least out abroad, enough people reading me, whatever. But all of this is to sharpen my analysis. All of this is to help us have a proper moral, ethical, and at the same time political framework on how we should move forward as a country. So, yun lang sinasabi ko lang, guys. Wala naman tayong sinasabi. Yun lang naman sinasabi natin. Yeah. Si Chico, sorry. Let's end on a more, less morbid note. Hindi talaga ako makamove on. I'm telling you, the proudest for me, what I'm most proud of is that against the backdrop of all of this really, really sad and all thing, kahit pa paano nakakahanap tayo. I mean, I learned this from my Russian friends, diba? Yung dark humor, like super dark humor. When things look like super helpless and hopeless, you go for humor. Guys, ito magiging presidente na. if if hindi lumaban yung if hindi lumaban ang militar, itong mga leader natin. Okay, by now. Dynastic succession. Alright, dynastic succession. Ang mangyari dito. At ganito po. Chico, those eyes, Chico, they don't lie. I'm telling you. Kaya, sabi ko in a half sarcastic way, kahit di mo binoto si BBM, kahit dami mo issue, medyo mag-hashtag protect BBM ka na ngayon dahil, yep, that's the alternative, Chico. Alright. Muy bien. Medyo stressful yung topic, I'll tell you what. So there's a lot of emotions and thinking behind it. So I had to end on a lighter note. But tuloy natin yung discussion na to. Tomorrow, God willing, inshallah, we're gonna have a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist on our show. We'll try to start around 9 p.m. Kausapin po natin is a good friend and colleague of mine who won the Pulitzer Prize with Reuters when they covered Duterte's war on drugs. Pag-usapan natin yon. So let's talk about the legit next level journalist, a Pulitzer Prize winner. Let's look at how journalism was working during the Duterte days, how they uncovered the Duterte drug war anomalies, and what is the future of democracy and journalism in the Philippines. On that note, maraming salamat sa inyong suporta, for your prayers. I mean, of course, you can imagine, there are a lot of demons we have to grapple with. Hindi lang yung mga hater boomer, yung mga ganyan low lives, but there are a lot of traumas. Lahat kami traumatized from the past. Probably next time I'll talk to Senator Trillanes. We'll talk about, it was traumatic. Those years were really traumatic, right? I tried to put a smile on it and all, but those were very, 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 very tough years. So kahit papaano, medyo gumagalaw na tayo sa tamang direksyon. But, Chico, no room for complacency. No room for complacency. Bueno, I think we're done. Muchas gracias. Hasta pronto tomorrow. Okay? Hasta mañana. Let's talk to our good friend about the war on drugs, among other things. Tuloy-tuloy lang yung discussion na to. By the way, ipopost ko sa baba yung mga key figures and graphs and data na nilabas ni Senator De Lima. Hopefully, we'll have also Senator De Lima back on our show. But I'd rather have her actually in person dun sa studio natin. So we'll try to organize those things. Alright? God bless and talk to you soon.